You are listening to the daily homily for Magdala in the Holy Land.
Jesus went across the Sea of Galilee. A large crowd followed him because they saw the signs he was performing on the sick. Jesus went up on the mountain, and there he sat down with his disciples. The Jewish feast of Passover was near. When Jesus raised his eyes and saw that a large crowd was coming to him, he said to Philip, "Where can we buy enough food for them to eat?" He said this to test him, because he himself knew what he was going to do. Philip answered him, 200 days' wages worth of food would not be enough for each of them to have a little. One of his disciples, Andrew, the brother of Simon Peter, said to him, "There is a boy here who has 5 barley loaves and 2 fish. But what good are these for so many?" Jesus said, "Have the people recline." Now there was a great deal of grass in that place, so the men reclined, about 5,000 in number. Then Jesus took the loaves, gave thanks, and distributed them to those who were reclining, and also as much of the fish as they wanted. When they had had their fill, he said to his disciples, "Gather the fragments left over so that nothing will be wasted." So they collected them and filled 12 wicker baskets with fragments from the 5 barley loaves that had been more than they could eat. When the people saw the sign he had done, they said, "Truly, this is the prophet, the one who is to come into the world." Since Jesus knew that they were going to come and carry him off to make him king, he withdrew again to the mountain alone. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
It's well known that we are celebrating Easter. Still, we know that. All of us who come to Mass, all the Catholics, a lot of the Christians know that, although a lot don't realize it. We have 50 days of Easter until Pentecost. And that's why we wear white all this time. That's the color. And then when Pentecost comes, afterwards we will start wearing green again. So we're in Easter time. We ran out of readings in the Gospel about the resurrection because there's not too much. And that's an interesting thing. And then on top of that, we've changed now to John's Gospel chapter 6. And for the next more than a week, I think, I'm not sure how long it's going to last, we're going to be reading John's Gospel chapter 6. And that's a very interesting fact that I'd like to draw to your attention. It's actually going to go on till next Thursday and maybe longer, next Friday, and even next Saturday. Okay? So we're going to be reading for more than a week John's Gospel chapter 6. And the question I could ask you is, why would we be reading John chapter 6? Well, John chapter 6 starts with the multiplication of the loaves, but it becomes the discourse on the Eucharist. And why is that fitting? Well, we could make another connection. What happens on the first day of the week in each of the appearances Jesus has with the disciples? He breaks bread for them. So the first day of the week became identified with the Eucharist, the experience of the risen Lord in the Easter period. It's Christ risen comes and he gives them the Eucharist. Just like in the Last Supper, he breaks bread. And they recognize him in the breaking of the bread. And this is a very interesting thing. We will also read John chapter 6 this year another time, in the Sundays of July approximately, for maybe 6 Sundays, to read John chapter 6. The reason for that is a different reason. We have cycle C this year for the Sunday readings. And no, AB, Matthew, Mark, cycle B, I think we're on. And we have Mark's Gospel. So Mark's Gospel is rather short. So something else has to be brought in. So we will have every 3 years cycle, Matthew, Mark, and Luke. In the year of Mark, we will always have the 6 readings, 6 Sundays with John's Gospel, so John chapter 6. We get a lot of John's Gospel at other times also, right after Christmas and after the resurrection. So We also get a lot of it in the leading up to the Passion because of the discussions with the authorities. So then I think what we should do the next 10 days is suggest that we should focus on the Eucharist and on this teaching that the Eucharist implies. And really, the little bread that's brought up for the Eucharist is very small. In the small little hosts here, it's a very practical thing, but it's very small. And these hosts carry, when the consecration happens, the abundance of the presence of God himself, of the incarnate Word made flesh in his sacrifice and in the resurrection, the risen Lord. So there's an extraordinary abundance. Maybe another thought we could think about from the first part of John's Gospel we had today is the multitudes are hungry and Jesus notices. And today the multitudes are hungry. The rise of depression is devastating. And so many people are deeply depressed, and the medical world is struggling with it, and also the religious world to help people. And you could say, well, what could we do in front of such an ocean of misery that invades and overwhelms like a tsunami the hearts of so many people? And it could be the little boy, so little, his 5 barley loaves, but his generosity, the generosity with which we meet people who are down. Or when we meet people who are confronting people who are down, like in the Sanhedrin in today's account. And there's one person there, Gamaliel. He's an extraordinary character. He was one of the greatest Jewish teachers. He was also the teacher of St. Paul. And Gamaliel is also famous for his generosity of heart in reading and interpreting the law. And he was a major figure that's honored in Judaism and also in Christianity. There's a place here between Jerusalem and Tel Aviv called Bet Jamal, and it's understood that he was buried there. So his remains were there. So then Gamaliel is speaking up, and it takes courage to add those words, a few words that go against the trend, but they speak truth. And through those words, the work of the church was saved. When you have the nerve with charity, wisdom, good reason, right measure to speak a good word, you've no idea of the impact of that in the life of a person, a life of a child. The opening up of a life, of an institution that's hammered. The smallest word of encouragement can help a lot. Our little bit that we bring to the altar each day at Mass is worth a lot, and God transforms it for the salvation of many.
Thank you for joining us today. If you want to learn more about Magdala, follow us on YouTube and on Facebook.